The dust of the trail clung to Lydia Keller's skirts as the stagecoach finally rolled to a halt in the small town of Silver Creek, Colorado. The year was 1875, and after a month-long journey from Boston, she had finally arrived at what was supposed to be the beginning of her new life. Clutching the wrinkled letter from Jacob Palmer, her soon-to-be husband, Lydia stepped down from the coach, her legs wobbling after the long, uncomfortable ride. "Silver Creek, madam," the driver announced, tossing down her trunk. "End of the line for you." Lydia tucked a stray strand of auburn hair beneath her bonnet and surveyed the dusty Main Street with its wooden buildings, saloon, and general store. It wasn't much, but according to Jacob's letters, his farm lay 5 miles outside of town, a promising homestead where they would build their life together. "Excuse me," she called to the driver. "I need to get to the Palmer farm. Is there someone who might take me there?" The driver scratched his beard. "Palmer farm, you say? Old man Palmer died last winter, miss." Lydia's heart dropped. "No, that's impossible. I received a letter from Jacob Palmer just last month. I'm to be his bride." She pulled out the letter, her hands trembling. The driver shrugged. "Don't know about any Jacob Palmer, miss. Only Palmer I knew was Henry, and he's long gone. Farm's probably abandoned now." Panic rose in Lydia's throat. She had spent every penny she had on this journey. There was no going back to Boston, where only shame and poverty awaited her after her father's financial ruin. "I need to go to the farm," she insisted. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding." After some negotiation and most of her remaining coins, Lydia managed to secure a ride from a local farmer heading in that direction. As they traveled the dusty road, her mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps Jacob was Henry's son. Perhaps there had been a mistake about the death. When they arrived at the Palmer farm, Lydia's worst fears were confirmed. The modest cabin stood silent, with no smoke from the chimney. The fields were unplowed and the barn door swung open in the breeze. Her driver helped her down and placed her trunk beside her. "I'm sorry, miss," he said, genuinely concerned. "Looks deserted. You want me to take you back to town?" "No," Lydia said, summoning her courage. "I'll be fine. Thank you for bringing me." After the farmer reluctantly departed, Lydia approached the cabin, her heart pounding. She knocked on the door, though she knew no one would answer. When she pushed it open, dust motes danced in the beam of sunlight that entered with her. The cabin was simple but solidly built. A table, a few chairs, a cook stove, and through a doorway, a bed with a faded quilt. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust. No one had lived here for months. Lydia sank onto a chair, exhaustion and despair finally overwhelming her. What was she to do now? Night would fall soon, and she was miles from town with nowhere to go and almost no money. Tears spilled down her cheeks as the reality of her situation crashed over her. She didn't know how long she sat there weeping when the sound of hoofbeats approached the cabin. Hastily wiping her tears, she moved to the window. A man on horseback had arrived, leading a second horse loaded with supplies. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair beneath his wide-brimmed hat. The stranger dismounted gracefully and was heading for the cabin when he noticed the open door. His hand moved to his holster as he approached cautiously. "Hello," he called. "Anyone in there?" Lydia stepped into the doorway, causing the man to halt in surprise. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps in his late 20s, with a sun-weathered face and the most startling blue eyes she'd ever seen. "Who are you?" he demanded, his hand still near his gun. "I'm Lydia Keller," she said, lifting her chin. I was supposed to meet Jacob Palmer here. I'm his mail-order bride." The words caught in her throat. "But it seems I've been deceived." The stranger's eyes widened and his hand dropped from his weapon. "Jacob Palmer? I don't know any Jacob Palmer." The stagecoach driver said the owner of this farm, Henry Palmer, died last winter. The man nodded slowly. "That's right, I knew Henry. Good man. I didn't know he had family looking to claim his place." "I don't believe he did," Lydia said, her voice breaking. "I think someone has played a cruel trick on me." The stranger studied her for a long moment, taking in her travel-worn appearance and the trunk beside the porch. "My name's Nathan Steele," he finally said, removing his hat. "I was a friend of Henry's. I've been away working cattle drives for nearly a year. I promised Henry I'd look after his place if anything happened to him. He gestured to the supplies on his horse. "I came to fix the place up and see about working the land. I reckon I was meant to be here instead." Lydia swallowed hard. "Mr. Steele, I have nowhere to go. I've spent everything I had to come here." Nathan looked at her, then at the darkening sky. "Miss Keller, it wouldn't be proper for us to stay here together," he said, "but I can't leave you alone either. There's a widow, Mrs. Wilson, who lives about a mile from here. She might take you in tonight. Tomorrow we can ride into town and sort this out." Relief washed over Lydia. "Thank you, Mr. Steele. I don't know what I would have done." As Nathan helped her back onto his spare horse, Lydia couldn't help but wonder what twist of fate had brought her to this empty farm, and what future now lay before her in this wild, unforgiving land. The ride to Mrs. Wilson's homestead was silent, save for the rhythmic hoofbeats and the occasional call of a distant coyote. Lydia clung to the saddle horn, having rarely ridden in her life. Every so often, Nathan would glance back to ensure she was managing. "Not much farther," he assured her as they crested a small hill. In the distance, Lydia could see a cabin with lamplight glowing from its windows, a beacon in the gathering darkness. Mrs. Wilson turned out to be a stout, silver-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. After Nathan explained the situation, she welcomed Lydia without hesitation. "Land's sakes, child, what a terrible ordeal," she exclaimed, ushering Lydia inside. "You must be exhausted and half-starved. Come, sit by the fire while I fix you a plate." Nathan hovered in the doorway, hat in hand. "I'll be at Palmer's place if you need anything, Mrs. Wilson." "You'll do no such thing, Nathan Steele," the widow declared. "You'll stay for supper first. That old place has been empty for months. It needs a good airing out and cleaning before it's fit for habitation." Over a simple but hearty meal of beans, cornbread, and dried apple pie, Nathan explained how he'd known Henry Palmer. "I was passing through 3 years ago, broke and hungry. Henry gave me work and a place to sleep. I stayed on for nearly a year, helping with the farm until I got restless again. I've been working cattle drives since then, but I always kept in touch with Henry. When I heard he'd passed, I decided to come back and see to his place." "Did he have any family?" Lydia asked. "None that I know of," Nathan said. "He was alone in the world like many out here." "Then who could have written to me pretending to be Jacob Palmer?" Lydia wondered aloud. "There are unscrupulous types who prey on women back east," Mrs. Wilson said gently. "They write these letters, take your money, and disappear. I've heard of it happening before." Lydia stared at her plate, humiliation burning her cheeks. "I was so desperate to leave Boston, I never considered it might be a deception." "What will you do now?" Nathan asked. "I don't know," Lydia admitted. "I have only a few dollars left. Not enough for a return ticket, even if I wanted to go back, which I don't. Silver Creek could use a schoolteacher," Mrs. Wilson suggested. "The last one left 6 months ago to get married." "I was a teacher's assistant in Boston," Lydia said, hope flickering within her. "Do you really think they might hire me?" "It's worth asking," Mrs. Wilson said. "Nathan can take you to see Mayor Donovan tomorrow." That night, in Mrs. Wilson's spare room, Lydia lay awake thinking of the strange turn her life had taken. She had come west to marry a man who didn't exist, only to find herself homeless in a strange town. Yet somehow, fate had placed Nathan Steele in her path at precisely the moment she needed help. The next morning, after a breakfast of cornmeal mush and strong coffee, Nathan arrived with his wagon to take Lydia into town. Mrs. Wilson had helped press her dress and loaned her a shawl that would make a better impression on the mayor. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Wilson," Lydia said, embracing the older woman. "You come back anytime, dear," Mrs. Wilson replied. "And Nathan," she added with a pointed look, "you be sure to bring her back for Sunday dinner, you hear." The ride to town was less awkward than the previous evening's journey. In the daylight, Lydia could appreciate the beauty of the land-rolling hills covered with prairie grass, stands of pine and aspen, and in the distance, the majestic outline of the Rocky Mountains. "It's beautiful here," she said, breaking the silence. "It is," Nathan agreed. "Different from Boston, I imagine. Very different. Boston is all cobblestones and brick, people and noise. This feels vast." She took a deep breath of the clean air. "My father lost everything in the financial panic 2 years ago. He died shortly after, and I had to make my own way." When I saw the advertisement for a mail-order bride, it seemed like providence. Nathan's expression darkened. I'm sorry about your father and that you were deceived. Perhaps it was fate, Lydia said. If I hadn't come here, where would I be? Still in Boston, struggling to survive on a teacher's assistant's meager wages. When they reached Silver Creek, the small town was already bustling with morning activity. Nathan helped Lydia down from the wagon in front of a 2-story building with mayor's office painted on the door. Would you like me to come with you? He asked. Lydia considered for a moment, then straightened her shoulders. No, thank you. I need to do this on my own. Mayor Donovan was a portly man with mutton chop whiskers and a booming voice. He listened to Lydia's story with growing interest. A teacher, you say? Well now, that is fortuitous. Our school's been closed since Miss Perkins left us. We've got nearly 20 children in town with no education. Can you start Monday next? Lydia could hardly believe her luck. Yes, sir, absolutely. The position includes room and board at Mrs. Landry's boarding house plus $15 a month. Mrs. Landry serves as the school board president, so she'll want to meet you, but I don't foresee any problems. Outside the mayor's office, Nathan was waiting, leaning against his wagon. Well, he asked when he saw her. I'm to be Silver Creek's new school teacher, Lydia exclaimed, unable to contain her excitement. I start next week, and there's a room for me at the boarding house. Nathan's smile was genuine. That's wonderful news, Miss Keller. Congratulations. Mayor Donovan is taking me to meet Mrs. Landry now, Lydia said. I can't thank you enough for your help, Mr. Steele. Nathan, he corrected her. And you're welcome. I'm glad things are working out for you. Something in his tone made Lydia pause. Will you be staying in the area for a while? I need to get Palmer's farm back in shape before I decide what to do with it. He hesitated. Remember, Mrs. Wilson expects you for Sunday dinner. I can come by and fetch you if you'd like. Lydia smiled. I'd like that very much, Nathan. As Mayor Donovan led her away to meet Mrs. Landry, Lydia glanced back at Nathan. He was watching her go, an unreadable expression on his face. For the first time since arriving in Colorado, Lydia felt that perhaps, just perhaps, things would turn out all right after all. The next few days passed in a whirlwind as Lydia settled into Mrs. Landry's boarding house and prepared for her teaching duties. Mrs. Landry was a thin, efficient woman in her 50s who ran her establishment with military precision, but showed Lydia unexpected kindness. You'll want to visit the general store for supplies, she advised. Put it on the school board's account, and here's a small advance on your salary to get yourself settled. Lydia's room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a desk by the window. It was more privacy than she'd had in Boston, where she'd shared a cramped room with 2 other teachers' assistants. On Sunday, Nathan arrived at the boarding house exactly when he said he would, driving his wagon. He'd cleaned up for the occasion, wearing a fresh shirt and his hair neatly combed, though his face was still tanned from working outdoors. You look well, he said as he helped her into the wagon. Town life must agree with you. Everyone has been very kind, Lydia replied. And tomorrow, I start teaching. I've been preparing lessons all week. As they rode to Mrs. Wilson's, Lydia found herself stealing glances at Nathan's profile. There was something compelling about him, a quiet strength and reliability that she found attractive. Have you been working at the Palmer farm? She asked. Yes, it needed a lot of work after sitting empty. The roof leaked in places and some critters had moved in, but the structure is sound and the land is good. He paused. I've been thinking of staying on, maybe permanently. Really? I thought you preferred cattle drives. Nathan kept his eyes on the road. A man gets tired of wandering eventually. Might be nice to have a place to call my own, Mrs. Wilson welcomed them with open arms and a table laden with food, a roast chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh bread, and green beans from her garden. For dessert, she'd made a blackberry cobbler that she proudly announced featured berries Nathan had picked for her. Throughout the meal, Lydia noticed how comfortable Nathan was with Mrs. Wilson, teasing her gently and helping her without being asked. It was clear they shared a genuine affection. Nathan's like the son I never had, Mrs. Wilson confided when he stepped outside to fetch more water. He stops by whenever he's in the area, fixes things around the place, makes sure I'm all right. He's been very kind to me as well, Lydia said. Mrs. Wilson gave her a knowing look. He's a good man, Lydia, one of the best I know. Never settles in one place for long, though. That's his only fault, if you can call it one. When it was time to leave, Mrs. Wilson pressed a basket of leftovers into Lydia's hands. For your dinner tomorrow, teaching is hungry work. On the ride back to town, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Nathan drove at a leisurely pace, seeming in no hurry to end their time together. Mrs. Wilson thinks the world of you, Lydia said. She's a fine woman, reminds me of my grandmother. His expression grew distant. She raised me after my parents died in a cholera outbreak when I was 10. I'm sorry, Lydia said softly. It was a long time ago. My grandmother passed when I was 18 and I've been on my own since. He glanced at her. What about your family? You mentioned your father, but what of your mother? She died when I was 15. Consumption. My father never recovered from losing her. When the financial panic hit, he lost the will to fight. Lydia sighed. I have an older sister who married well and moved to Philadelphia, but we've grown apart since father's death. As the wagon rolled into town, the lights of the boarding house came into view too soon for Lydia's liking. Nathan helped her down, his hands strong and warm around her waist. Thank you for today, she said, reluctant to say goodbye. It was lovely. Perhaps next Sunday you might like to see the farm, Nathan suggested. I've made good progress on the repairs. I'd like that very much, Lydia replied, her heart beating faster. As she watched him drive away, Lydia realized that for the first time since her father's death, she felt hopeful about the future. Silver Creek might not be where she had planned to settle, but it was beginning to feel like a place she could call home. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and a knot of nervousness in Lydia's stomach. She dressed with care in her best dress, a navy blue cotton that Mrs. Wilson had helped her freshen up, and headed to the schoolhouse at the edge of town. The one-room schoolhouse was larger than she expected, with rows of wooden desks facing a teacher's desk on a small platform. A blackboard covered most of the front wall, and a pot-bellied stove stood ready for the coming winter months. Lydia was arranging her supplies when the first students began to arrive, shyly peering through the doorway at their new teacher. By 9 o'clock, 17 children ranging from 6 to 15 years old had filled the desks. Lydia took a deep breath and called the class to order. Good morning. I am Miss Keller, your new teacher. I'm very pleased to meet all of you, and I look forward to our time together. The day went remarkably well, despite the wide range of ages and abilities Lydia had to accommodate. The older students helped the younger ones, and all seemed eager to have a teacher again after months without formal education. As the week progressed, Lydia fell into a comfortable routine. She rose early, taught until 3 in the afternoon, then spent her evenings preparing lessons and grading the students' work. Several parents stopped by to introduce themselves and express gratitude for her taking the position. By Friday, Lydia felt as though she'd lived in Silver Creek for months rather than days. She was heading back to the boarding house when she spotted Nathan loading supplies into his wagon outside the general store. Her heart quickened at the sight of him. Nathan. She called, hurrying across the street. He turned, his face lighting up when he saw her. Miss Keller, how are you finding teaching? Please, it's Lydia, she reminded him, and it's wonderful. The children are eager to learn and everyone has been so welcoming. I'm glad to hear it. He secured a sack of flour in the wagon. I've been meaning to come into town, but the farm has kept me busy. Are we still on for Sunday? Lydia asked, trying to sound casual. Of course, I'll come for you around noon if that suits you. As they spoke, Lydia became aware of curious glances from townspeople passing by. A respectable schoolteacher conversing with a cowboy on the main street was bound to create talk in a small town like Silver Creek. I should let you finish your errands, she said. I look forward to Sunday. That Sunday, Nathan arrived promptly at noon as promised. This time, instead of the wagon, he rode with 2 saddled horses. I thought we might ride to the farm, he explained. It's a beautiful day and the views are better on horseback. Lydia hesitated. I'm not much of a rider, I'm afraid. Daisy here is the gentlest mare you'll ever meet, Nathan assured her, patting the dappled gray horse. I'll keep us at a walk. With Nathan's help, Lydia mounted the horse, arranging her skirts as modestly as possible. True to his word, Nathan kept the pace slow and stayed close beside her as they left town. "How's the schoolhouse?" he asked. "It's quite adequate, though the roof needs patching in one corner. It dripped during yesterday's rain." "I could take a look at it for you," Nathan offered. Roofing is one skill I've picked up over the years. As they rode, Lydia found herself relaxing in the saddle, enjoying the gentle rhythm of the horse beneath her and the beauty of the countryside. Nathan pointed out landmarks, a rock formation that looked like a sleeping giant, a creek where he'd caught trout with Henry Palmer, a distant hill where wild horses sometimes grazed. "There it is," he said finally, as they crested a rise. Palmer's farm, or what will be a farm again, with enough work. Lydia was surprised at the transformation since she'd last seen the place. The cabin's exterior had been repaired, with fresh chinking between the logs and a new section of roof. The yard had been cleared of weeds, and the broken-down corral was now rebuilt. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the whole place had an air of revival. "Nathan, it's remarkable what you've accomplished in such a short time," she said as he helped her dismount. "There's still plenty to do," he said, though she could tell her praise pleased him. "I've only just started on the fields, but come inside, I have lunch prepared." The interior of the cabin had been equally transformed. Gone was the layer of dust, replaced by polished surfaces and simple but comfortable furnishings. A pot of stew bubbled on the stove, filling the cabin with a savory aroma. "It's venison stew," Nathan explained as he served her. "I shot a deer last week." As they ate, Nathan told her more about his plans for the farm. "The soil is good for wheat, and there's enough pasture for a small herd of cattle. With hard work, it could be productive again." "You sound like you're putting down roots," Lydia observed. Nathan looked contemplative. "Maybe I am. I've been restless since my grandmother died, always moving on before I could get too attached to any place or anyone." He met her eyes briefly before looking away. "But I'm not getting any younger, and there's something about this place that feels right." After lunch, Nathan showed Lydia around the property. The day was warm and the walk pleasant as he pointed out his planned improvements and where he hoped to plant crops come spring. "It's a lot of work for one man," Lydia remarked. "Yes, it is," Nathan agreed. "A place like this needs a family to truly thrive." Henry knew that, but his wife died in childbirth years ago, and he never remarried. They reached a small rise overlooking the property, where a single oak tree provided shade. Nathan spread a blanket he'd brought along, and they sat watching clouds drift across the vast Colorado sky. "I never thought I'd end up in a place like this," Lydia admitted. "I always imagined staying in Boston, perhaps marrying a shopkeeper or clerk." "And instead, you became a mail-order bride," Nathan said, his tone gentle rather than judging. "It seemed like the only way out after Father died. The school where I worked barely paid enough for room and board. When I saw the advertisement for a bride wanted in Colorado, it felt like an answer to my prayers." She plucked a blade of grass, twisting it between her fingers. "I exchanged letters with Jacob Palmer for 3 months before agreeing to come. He wrote so beautifully about his farm, his dreams for the future, his loneliness. I thought I knew him." "I'm sorry you were deceived," Nathan said, "but I'm not sorry you came to Silver Creek." The warmth in his voice made Lydia look up. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a possibility. The moment was broken by distant thunder. Nathan looked up at the darkening sky to the west. "We should head back. Storms move fast here, and we don't want to be caught in the open." They barely made it to the cabin before the first heavy raindrops began to fall. By the time they reached the porch, the sky had opened up in a torrential downpour. "Looks like we'll have to wait it out," Nathan said, shaking water from his hat. "These summer storms usually pass quickly." Inside, Nathan stoked the fire while Lydia stood by the window, watching lightning illuminate the landscape. There was something both frightening and exhilarating about the raw power of the storm. "You're shivering," Nathan observed, draping a blanket around her shoulders. His hands lingered briefly, warm and strong. "Thank you," she murmured, suddenly very aware of how alone they were. As if reading her thoughts, Nathan stepped back. "I'll make some coffee to warm us up." The storm showed no signs of abating as they sipped their coffee by the fire. Conversation flowed easily between them, moving from Nathan's experiences on cattle drives to Lydia's childhood in Boston. "My father was a banker," she told him. "We lived comfortably until the panic. It's strange how quickly everything can change." "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns," Nathan agreed. "When I left home at 18, I never imagined the places I'd go or the things I'd see. Do you regret any of it? The wandering?" Nathan considered the question seriously. "No, I don't think so. Each place taught me something, each job gave me new skills. But there comes a time when a man wants something more permanent." His eyes met hers. Something real. The intensity of his gaze made Lydia's heart race. She looked away, back to the rain streaming down the windows. "The storm isn't letting up," she said. "Mrs. Landry will be worried." "We can't ride back in this," Nathan said, concern evident in his voice. "It wouldn't be safe. We'll have to wait until morning." Lydia's eyes widened. "But my reputation, I'll sleep in the barn," Nathan said firmly. "You can take the cabin. It's not ideal, but it's better than risking the storm." Lydia knew he was right, though spending the night unchaperoned would certainly cause gossip if anyone discovered it. But what choice did they have? "Very well," she agreed reluctantly. "But please don't sleep in the barn. It's still being repaired and you said yourself it leaks. You can sleep here by the fire. I'll take the bed." Nathan hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but I'll be gone at first light to check on the horses and we'll leave as soon as the weather permits." As Lydia settled into the bed behind the privacy screen later that night, listening to the storm rage outside and Nathan's quiet movements as he prepared his bedroll by the fire, she couldn't help but reflect on the strange twist of fate that had brought her here. 1 month ago, she had been preparing to marry a stranger named Jacob Palmer. Now, she was spending the night under the roof of another stranger one who was rapidly becoming something much more than that. Morning arrived with clear skies and birdsong. Lydia awoke to find the cabin empty, though the fire had been stoked and coffee was brewing on the stove. A note on the table read, "Checking on the horses, back soon, N." She had just finished making a simple breakfast from the supplies Nathan had in the cupboard when he returned, his shirt damp from the morning dew. "The trail should be passable now," he said. "We can leave after breakfast." They ate in companionable silence, both aware that their unexpected night together had shifted something between them. As they prepared to leave, Nathan seemed to be wrestling with something. "Lydia," he finally said, "I want you to know that I respect you immensely. Your reputation is important, especially as the town's teacher. If anyone should ask questions about yesterday, I want you to feel free to tell them exactly what happened. We did nothing wrong." "Thank you, Nathan," she said, touched by his concern. "I appreciate that." The ride back to town was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. As they approached Silver Creek, Lydia became increasingly anxious about what awaited them. Would Mrs. Landry be scandalized? Would there be gossip that might jeopardize her position? Her fears were realized when they rode down the main street and she saw Mrs. Landry standing outside the boarding house, arms crossed, her expression severe. Several townspeople stopped what they were doing to watch their arrival. Nathan dismounted first, then helped Lydia down. "Mrs. Landry," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "Miss Keller and I were caught in yesterday's storm while visiting the Palmer farm. I insisted she take shelter in the cabin while I stayed in the barn. We left as soon as the trails were passable this morning." It was a small lie, but one meant to protect her, and Lydia was grateful for it. Mrs. Landry's expression softened slightly. "I was worried sick when you didn't return last night," she said to Lydia, "but I understand about the storm. It was quite severe." "I apologize for causing you concern," Lydia said sincerely. "Well, no harm done, I suppose," Mrs. Landry said, though her tone suggested the matter wasn't entirely closed. "Come inside and get cleaned up. You look exhausted." As Lydia turned to thank Nathan, she caught sight of Mayor Donovan approaching, his expression grave. "Miss Keller, Mr. Steele," he greeted them. "I'd like a word, if I may." Lydia's heart sank. Was her teaching position already in jeopardy? "Of course, Mayor," Nathan said calmly. "I understand you were caught in the storm," the mayor began. Unfortunately, perception often matters as much as reality in a small town. Miss Keller, as our school teacher, you're held to a high standard of behavior. Mayor Donovan, Nathan interrupted, his voice firm but respectful. If there's any blame to be assigned here, it falls entirely on me. I should have checked the weather more carefully before inviting Miss Keller to see the farm. Be that as it may, the mayor started. If I may, Mrs. Wilson's voice rang out as she approached from down the street. Lydia was surprised to see the older woman in town so early. I believe I can clear up any confusion. Miss Keller and Mr. Steele stopped at my place yesterday afternoon, as they often do on Sundays. When the storm worsened, I insisted they both stay the night rather than risk the journey back to town. Miss Keller shared my spare room, while Mr. Steele slept in the barn, as is proper. They just left my place this morning. Lydia stared at Mrs. Wilson in astonishment. The woman was lying outright to protect them, something Lydia would never have expected from the forthright widow. Mayor Donovan looked relieved. Well, that certainly clears things up. My apologies for the misunderstanding. As the small crowd dispersed, Mrs. Wilson gave Lydia a subtle wink. Nathan, she said, be a dear and help me with my purchases at the general store before I head home. Once they were alone, Mrs. Wilson fixed them both with a stern look. Now, I don't know exactly what happened yesterday, and I don't want to know. But I do know you're both good people who got caught in a bad situation. Sometimes the truth needs a little help, especially in small towns where gossip spreads faster than wildfire. Mrs. Wilson, I don't know how to thank you, Lydia said, moved by the woman's kindness. No need for thanks, Mrs. Wilson replied, just be careful. And Nathan, she added, giving him a meaningful look, perhaps it's time you made your intentions clear one way or another. Ambiguity leads to trouble. As Mrs. Wilson headed toward the general store, Nathan turned to Lydia. She's right, I've been unfair to you. What do you mean? Lydia asked. I've been drawn to you since the moment we met, Nathan admitted, his voice low, but I've been hesitant to speak plainly because my life has been so unsettled. It wouldn't be right to ask for your affections when I myself wasn't sure if I would stay. Lydia's heart beat faster. And now I know that I want to stay, to make Palmer's farm my own, to build something lasting. He took a deep breath. Lydia, would you allow me to call on you properly? With Mrs. Landry's permission and everything above board, joy bubbled up inside her. Yes, Nathan, I would like that very much. The next few weeks passed in a pleasant rhythm for Lydia. Her days were filled with teaching, while her evenings often included Nathan's company. True to his word, he approached Mrs. Landry for permission to call on Lydia, which was granted with surprisingly few objections after a lengthy discussion of his intentions. 3 evenings a week, Nathan would come to the boarding house parlor, where he and Lydia would talk under Mrs. Landry's watchful eye. On Sundays, they would attend church together, followed by dinner with Mrs. Wilson or occasionally a picnic by the creek, always with proper chaperonage. Nathan became a familiar figure around town, not just as Lydia's suitor, but as a helpful neighbor. When he wasn't working on the Palmer farm, he could be found repairing the schoolhouse roof, helping the blacksmith with a difficult job, or delivering supplies to outlying homesteads. He's really settling in, Mrs. Wilson commented one Sunday after church. I've never seen Nathan so content in one place. Lydia smiled, watching as Nathan helped an elderly man up the church steps. He says the farm is coming along well. He's already planning what to plant in spring. It's not just the farm that's keeping him here, Mrs. Wilson said with a knowing smile. As autumn progressed, bringing cooler weather and golden leaves, Lydia found herself falling more deeply in love with both Nathan and Silver Creek itself. The little town had welcomed her, and she had built a life she never could have imagined back in Boston. One crisp October evening, Nathan invited Lydia for a special dinner at the farm, with Mrs. Wilson as chaperone. When Lydia arrived, she was amazed at the transformation of the cabin. Nathan had added curtains at the windows, a proper dining table with chairs, and even a small bookshelf filled with books. Nathan, it's wonderful, she exclaimed. You've made it a real home. Not quite yet, he said mysteriously, Mrs. Wilson busied herself in the kitchen while Nathan showed Lydia the latest improvements to the property, a new chicken coop, expanded vegetable garden, and the beginnings of a proper fence around the house. "I have something I want to show you," he said, leading her to the barn. Inside, in a stall filled with fresh hay, stood a beautiful bay mare. "This is Penny. I bought her last week from a rancher outside town. She's gentle but spirited. I thought you might like to have a horse of your own." Lydia approached the mare, who nuzzled her hand affectionately. "She's beautiful, Nathan, but why would I need my own horse?" Nathan took a deep breath. "Because I'm hoping you'll be making the ride from town to the farm regularly, very regularly." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "Lydia, these past 2 months have been the happiest of my life. I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl. "This was my grandmother's. She told me to give it to the woman who finally made me want to put down roots." He dropped to one knee. "Lydia Keller, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of making this farm a true home with me?" Tears of happiness sprang to Lydia's eyes. "Yes, Nathan, yes, with all my heart." From the barn doorway came the sound of clapping. Mrs. Wilson stood there, beaming. "Well, it's about time. Now come inside before the stew gets cold. We have a wedding to plan." News of their engagement spread quickly through Silver Creek. Most reactions were positive, though Lydia was concerned about the school board's response. Would they want to replace her once she was married? To her relief, Mrs. Landry put those fears to rest. "We hired you for your skills as a teacher, Miss Keller. While it's customary for female teachers to resign upon marriage, the board has agreed that given the difficulty we had finding you in the first place, we would be foolish to let you go. You may continue teaching as Mrs. Steele, at least until you have children of your own." With that hurdle cleared, Lydia and Nathan set their wedding date for the first Saturday in December, before the heavy winter snows would make travel difficult. The entire town seemed involved in the preparations. The church ladies organized a quilting bee to create a wedding gift. The general store owner offered a discount on fabric for Lydia's dress, and even the saloon keeper promised to keep his establishment closed during the ceremony out of respect. Mrs. Wilson, who had become like a mother to Lydia, insisted on hosting the wedding dinner at her home. "The farm isn't quite ready for entertaining yet, and my place is bigger than the boarding house parlor," she declared. As the wedding day approached, Lydia found herself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come to Colorado to marry a man who didn't exist, only to find a love more genuine than she could have imagined. The night before the wedding, as she packed her belongings at the boarding house, Lydia came across the original letter from Jacob Palmer that had lured her west. She had kept it all this time, tucked into her Bible. Reading it now, she was struck by how fate had worked in mysterious ways. "I have a farm outside a town called Silver Creek," the letter read. "It's not grand, but it's good land with potential. I'm looking for a partner in life, someone who values hard work and simple pleasures, someone who could help make this place a home." In the end, she had found exactly that, not with the fictional Jacob Palmer, but with Nathan Steele, a man whose honesty and kindness had won her heart completely. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with a fresh dusting of snow that made Silver Creek look like a scene from a fairy tale. Lydia wore a dress of deep blue wool, trimmed with lace that the ladies of the town had collectively contributed. Mrs. Wilson had insisted on adding a lace veil, because every bride deserves to feel special on her day. The church was full to overflowing. It seemed the entire town had turned out, along with farmers and ranchers from the surrounding area. Nathan stood at the altar looking handsome in a new suit, his normally tanned face slightly pale with nervousness. As Lydia walked down the aisle on Mayor Donovan's arm, the mayor having offered to stand in for her father, she saw Nathan's expression change from anxiety to wonder. The love in his eyes as he watched her approach nearly took her breath away. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows and rings, Nathan's a plain gold band that he'd ordered specially from Denver. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the congregation startled them both into laughter. The celebration at Mrs. Wilson's home afterward was joyous and boisterous. There was food in abundance, music provided by local fiddle players, and even dancing in the cleared front room. Nathan and Lydia moved through it all in a happy daze, accepting congratulations and well wishes from people who just months ago had been strangers. As evening approached, Nathan whispered to Lydia, "Are you ready to go home, Mrs. Steele?" The words sent a thrill through her. Home, their home. The farm that had once been empty now waited for them to fill it with life and love. They said their goodbyes, accepted final hugs from Mrs. Wilson and Mrs. Landry, and rode away in Nathan's wagon, which the town's young men had decorated with ribbons and bells. Behind them, the celebration continued, but ahead lay the beginning of their life together. At the farm, Nathan insisted on carrying Lydia over the threshold. "For luck," he said, lifting her easily in his strong arms. Inside, the cabin glowed with lamplight and warmth from the fire he had banked that morning. "Welcome home," he said softly, setting her down gently. "It's perfect," Lydia replied, looking around at what was now her home. Nathan had made one more addition since her last visit, a small writing desk by the window, complete with paper, ink, and pens. "I know how much you enjoy writing," he explained. "I thought you might like a place of your own." The thoughtfulness of the gesture moved her deeply. This man, who had once been a wanderer with no permanent home, had created not just a place for himself, but a space specifically designed for her happiness. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Nathan's arms around her, Lydia reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them together. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked softly. Nathan was quiet for a moment. "I never used to," he finally said. "I thought life was just a series of choices and coincidences. But then you arrived at this empty farm looking for a man who didn't exist, and I showed up the same day, saying I was meant to be here instead." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "If that's not fate, I don't know what is." In the years that followed, Lydia often thought about that conversation. Their life together unfolded in ways neither could have predicted, with joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges, but always with a deep foundation of love and respect. The farm prospered under their joint care. Nathan's knowledge of the land combined with Lydia's organizational skills proved a formidable partnership. They added a proper barn, expanded the house as their family grew, and eventually became one of the most successful farms in the area. Lydia continued teaching until their first child was born, a daughter they named Eleanor after Nathan's grandmother. 2 years later came William, named for Lydia's father, and eventually a second daughter, Rose, named simply because they both loved the flower, Mrs. Wilson remained a beloved figure in their lives, a surrogate grandmother to their children until her peaceful passing in her sleep at the age of 78. She left her small homestead to them, and they eventually sold it to a young couple just starting out, continuing the cycle of homesteading that had built the West. Silver Creek grew from a small outpost to a proper town, with a bank, a newspaper office, and eventually even a small library that Lydia helped establish. Nathan served several terms on the town council, his steady judgment respected by all. Through it all, they never forgot how they met the mail-order bride who arrived at an empty farm, and the cowboy who said he was meant to be there instead. It became a story they told their children and eventually their grandchildren, a tale of deception that led to the truest love either could have imagined. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the town organized a celebration in their honor. By then, Nathan and Lydia Steele were pillars of the community, their farm a showplace, their marriage an example to younger couples of what partnership could achieve. As they stood together receiving congratulations, Mayor Harrington, the son of the man who had been mayor when Lydia arrived, made a speech recounting their unusual beginning. "Silver Creek has been blessed by the mistake that brought Lydia Keller to us," he concluded. "And even more blessed by the fate that put Nathan Steele in exactly the right place at exactly the right time." To Nathan and Lydia Steele, whose love story reminds us all that sometimes life's greatest disappointments lead to its greatest joys. Later that night, alone on the porch of the home they had built together, Nathan took Lydia's hand in his. Though lines now framed his blue eyes and silver threaded his once dark hair, to Lydia he was as handsome as the day they met. 25 years, he marveled. When I rode up to Palmer's farm that day and found you there, I never imagined what lay ahead. Are you disappointed? Lydia teased. The wandering cowboy who became a settled farmer with 3 children and 5 grandchildren, Nathan laughed, pulling her close. The only disappointment would have been if I'd ridden on by and missed meeting the love of my life. He kissed her softly. I told you then I was meant to be here instead, and every day since has proven it true. As they looked out over their land, the fields now golden with wheat, the orchard they had planted when Alina was born, the creek where their grandchildren now fished as Nathan had once taught their children, Lydia felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had come west seeking a new beginning, a husband she had never met, a life she could only imagine. She had found something far different, but infinitely more precious, a love that had grown deeper with each passing year, a family that filled her heart, and a home created not from buildings and land, but from shared dreams and unwavering commitment. The mail-order bride had indeed arrived at an empty farm, but the man who claimed he was meant to be there instead had filled that emptiness with a lifetime of love. And in the end, that was all that mattered.